Hello, True Matters listeners. This is Macaile coming at you with a brand new set of Invisalign trays. I actually have people reach out to me that they kind of liked that I recorded my solo with them in. I don't know if it's because I just talked cute or because they liked the fact that I showed up imperfectly, but either way, here I am again. I think I'm getting the hang of it, so hopefully it's not too distracting. But I'm not supposed to have them out for more than like an hour 3 times a day, and so we're just gonna go with it. I am admittedly stalling right now because this has been a highly requested episode, and I think I have also been really just avoiding going here. I've had a lot of people ask me to talk a little bit more about not only losing my dad specifically, but then how I have learned to cope with grief and loss, having lost a parent at a pretty young age. And today I felt exceptionally strong and like I was in a really peaceful place to go there. Something I really learned about my personal journey with grief is that there are days I have to give myself permission to close the door. There are days I want to talk about my dad or other people I've lost ad nauseum. And there are days where I talk about him like he's still here because it's too painful to acknowledge that he's not. And in March of next year, it'll be 10 years since losing him. So if you're listening to this and you've lost someone you love, I just want to start this episode with a really big exhale from my heart to yours that you're not alone. And grief is truly one of the most universal binding threads for connection, for understanding, for empathy, for so many things that are what make us human. At the end of the day, the only real certain thing is that we all live and we all die. And the space in between those things is different for everyone. And losing my dad when I was 25 gave me a sobering dose of reality that helped me recognize my own mortality in a lot of ways, but also the mortality of those around me, and has taught me more since he's died than I ever could have imagined. And while it's such an honor to share those lessons, there are times where I'm ready for it and there's times when I'm not. And I just had another request for this solo today. And so I decided I would sit down and I would do my best and I would just let myself go there. So this is really unplanned and unprepared, but I think that sometimes the best things come from just speaking from the heart. So to go back and fill everyone in on the story of my dad's passing, my dad, Don Hutt, was larger than life. He packed 100 years into his 62 short years of life, truly. He was a personality that could fill a room. Every room he walked in, people wanted to be near him, even though he had a personality at times that was enraging and difficult and pushy and infuriating. He also had an ability to love and make you feel loved and seen like no one I've ever experienced. I do have a former episode where I talk about lessons I've learned from my dad on an old podcast I used to host that is still live. It's the True Matters podcast. And I will link that in the show notes of this if anyone wants to kind of dive in and learn a little bit more about the lessons I've learned from him and then also since losing him. But I want this particular episode to be structured a little bit more around the actual conversation of grief and losing someone that you love. So my dad was larger than life. However, he also did not take super good care of himself. That's an understatement. He took terrible care of himself, especially in his older years. And he was from the generation where he wanted to be able to just pick up and go whenever he felt like it. He wanted to be able to have Myers rum and orange juice for breakfast, and that counted as his daily serving of fruits, and there was no budging beyond that. His favorite meal was a Costco rotisserie chicken with like half a gallon of mayonnaise between 2 slices of bread. So that man definitely did not take nutrition and the food pyramid or, his daily exercise or anything like that to heart, and it showed over the years. He played professional football and was extremely athletic and extremely capable, but he kind of got to a point where I think it just wasn't something that he was concerned with anymore. And ultimately, the years spent, partying, burning the candle at both ends, playing extreme contact sports, and then living as though he was, 19 years old when he was in his late 50s, is ultimately what ended up kind of causing his health to deteriorate pretty quickly. The trajectory in which my dad became sick and then ultimately ended up dying was pretty short. Um, I remember he was dating somebody at the time. She called me. She was really worried about his health, worried about kind of his behaviors and patterns at the time. There were things that I wasn't as aware of at that moment. I was 25, and there were things about his personal life that I wasn't really privy to, things that had been shielded from me by my mom, by other family members, mostly just in regards to recreational drug use. I'll just say it out loud. I was very positively shielded from that my entire life. I never had any idea that that was going on. And it's one of those things that as an adult, you think back on certain stories or situations that your child brain comprehends one way. And then as an adult, you have this moment of like, wait a second. And you connect some dots that make things make sense in a different way. But even at that point in my life, I hadn't really gotten there with him. I also think that oftentimes with our parents in particular, we put them on a pedestal and we feel as though they're untouchable in a way. They'll always be like older than us, wiser than us, in a different place than us. And there is a point in time where we become adults and we almost level with them in a way, but our psyche, this Freudian thing within us doesn't really view it that way. And so even if it was so blatant it could have smacked me in the face, I don't think that I would have even known that some of that was going on. In the time that his girlfriend called me, I then went all over the place trying to find where he was. I ended up finding him at a hotel somewhat close by. I threatened the person at the front desk that I was going to go knock on every single door until he answered if they wouldn't just tell me which room he was in, which probably wasn't well, you know what? Actually, it was a pretty smart moment of me because I am tenacious, and when I want something, I get it. And so they finally ended up telling me which room he was in. I was able to go find him. He was extremely swollen and inflamed, had pitting edema in his hands and feet, had the heat of his room cranked up to like 80 something degrees, was sweating through the sheets. His throat and chest and lungs were gurgly. It was really scary. And I ended up getting him a doctor's appointment. We went and saw our family doctor that my dad was really good friends with as well and had played football with. And he essentially was like, you need to go to the ER. So we went to the ER, and, long story short, they ran some tests, ended up admitting him. He was very ill and really not doing well, spent a decent amount of time. It's a blur to me at this point. I know I've got journals and things I've written that have the exact amount, but maybe a week or something in the hospital, but was very stubborn. They had him as a fall risk. They didn't want him standing up to go to the bathroom on his own. If you knew my dad, those are things that aren't going to fly. Like, he is going to do what he wants to do on his own timing and when he wants it. And, there was really no telling him otherwise. So he was actually in the ICU and discharged himself. They didn't ever floor him down to a lesser floor where he was able to kind of transition out. I actually got there when he had already kind of walked out, like all but tearing the IVs out of his arms and saying, I'm out of here. And so it was a really big whirlwind where we weren't really provided with great discharge instruction. I didn't know what medications needed to be filled, if he was supposed to be on oxygen all the time. I didn't really even know how to get that coordinated, with Norco and all of these things. And it was a really helpless feeling. I remember begging the hospitalist that worked there at the time. I found him in the hallway and I said, please, please, please tell him he can't leave. Like, please, if we leave right now, I'm worried he's going to die. Like, he's not healthy. He's so sick. And he said, there's nothing I can do. He's walked out, and that's that, basically. And the next day I drove him to another ER and tried to get him admitted, and they did the routine assessment of him, and essentially like he wasn't sick enough by those standards to be admitted. And so we went back home, and it was less than 2 weeks, I'd say, from that. He was selling his house, and all of his stuff was in this big shop of his garage. Like, he had a couple shops. All of his stuff got moved out there. A bunch of my friends helped. We moved everything. And then he was going to go live in an extended stay hotel until he found a house that he wanted to buy, because the people that had bought his home were going to be occupying it. So there was a lot of moving parts, and it was really stressful. And he ended up going to the extended stay hotel, and the Monday that I got the phone call, he had passed away. My uncle and myself and my dad were going to go look at houses. You know, he had a bunch of printouts of these houses we were going to look at. We had a plan for all these homes we were going to go see. He was excited for the first time in a long time. I think that he was going to have a space that felt like his again, and he was really excited for that. And I was staying at my mom's at the time, and woke up that Monday morning, made some coffee. What's interesting is I'm usually so on time, and if anything, ahead of time. And that morning was just like a little bit delayed and kind of running behind, which is very unlike me. And at the same time, I'm so endlessly thankful that that was how my story played out, because I got a phone call from my uncle on my cell phone. And when I answered the phone, he said, "I just got to your dad's hotel room. He's dead." And he was in shock. It's a scene I play in my head over and over and over again. He hadn't called 911. He hadn't done anything, because he was so in shock that it was almost like I was talking to somebody, like a child that didn't know what to do. And then I was trying to jump in and say what to do, but both of us were in shock almost. So I'm like, "Have you called 911? And he's like, "There's no reason. Like, I know he's dead." And I'm like, "I know, but you still need to do that. You need to call. They still need to come." And like, it was like two kids trying to figure out how to, get out of being in trouble for toilet paper in the neighbor's house. Like, we both were just like sort of not making sense and kind of going back and forth. And in the moment when he first called, I was able to kind of jump into this action place. And then the minute I hung up the phone, I just fell to the floor. And I remember like talking out loud, being like, I just kept saying, "How is this happening? How is this real? How is this happening? This can't be real." And that raw moment of 1 second before that phone call, my life was so incredibly different. And the moment I got that phone call, my life would never be the same. There are times that I wish I could go back to who I was before I got that phone call, just to experience her again. Because after you get a phone call like that, after you receive information like that, you are automatically different, and there's no way to go back to the person that you were before. And that has been a really big lesson of acceptance for me, in truly releasing this former version of myself, who at 25 had 2 living parents, and at 25 and X amount of days and seconds didn't any longer. Because part of grief, I think, is grieving who you were before you lost that person, because you really are never the same again. And it's a bargaining act, in the same way of wanting the person back that you lost, in wanting this version of yourself back that was light and airy and hopeful and maybe a little naive, and different feelings that are really hard to connect with, especially in the wake of grief. The next step was the person that I was dating at the time and my mom got to me and physically picked me up off the ground. They were able to be strong in areas that I was not even able to think straight. They drove me to his hotel. And I will never forget, all I wanted was to run into his room and make sure he was okay, and check on him, and just make sure that he knew I was there and I loved him, and so he wasn't alone. My mom stopped me in the hallway and put her hands on my shoulders and looked me in the eyes, and she said, "You have to make a decision right now. You have to decide how you want to remember your dad. The last time you saw him, he was alive. He was larger than life. He was himself. He is gone. Seeing his body now is not going to bring him back. And she knows how deep of a feeler I am, and she knows how deeply impacted by certain things will get seared into my brain, or I'm such a feeler, I'm so empathetic and such a sponge to things, that in that moment she was able to know what I needed more than I knew what I needed. And she gave me the choice and said, he is not in there any longer. Being in there with his body is not going to bring him back. It is up to you, but I am concerned that if this is the last memory you have of your dad, it's not going to be the memory that you wish you were able to then move forward with. And I slid down the wall of the hallway of the hotel and curled up in a little ball and cried and shook and bargained with the world to bring him back, and ultimately ended up making the choice to not go in there. And I will say that there are moments in a really, really deep place of grief where I will almost punish myself for not going in there, and think to myself, oh, if I would give anything right now to like hold his hand or kiss his cheek and be there with him. And I think that I've really, really learned how to combat those thoughts with so much gratitude that my last memory of him really was the truest essence of himself and the truest version of who he was when he was on this earth. And I don't think there's a right or wrong reason. If you're listening to this and you had a completely different experience, or maybe seeing that person and being with them, or maybe being with somebody as they passed, which I've also been in the presence of my grandmother. Like, we all were at the house with her and saying goodbye and able to be with her body as, we all grieved and all of these things. There's not a right or wrong way. This is just my experience. And I think that no matter what our experience is, grief will try to come into our minds and tell us it should have been different, or if it had been different, we would hurt less, or it would somehow feel more peaceful, or whatever. And I'm telling you right now that one of the biggest gifts you can give to the person that has passed and to yourself is to forgive yourself for the circumstances around their passing. Nobody knows what to do in those moments. Nobody knows the right or the best or the outcome that's going to sting the least. They all hurt. And putting ourselves through punishment or grief and shame around things that aren't going to change anything is very, very unproductive. And I'm saying that from somebody who knows from super direct experience. After that, a lot of it is a really big whirlwind. I remember my mom giving me medication to help me sleep and to let my body rest. I remember being in the kitchen of her house and having it be like a revolving door of people and tears and flowers, and being so angry every time another bouquet of flowers showed up, and feeling like this is so fucking stupid. Like, flowers and candy and whatever else is such a poor representation of the depth in which loss actually inhabits. And I know it's all an act of love and maybe trying to send life where we're experiencing death. But I just remember feeling so angry and then numb and then sad and then angry and numb and sad. And a lot of those first few days are a huge whirlwind of just like glimpses of remembering certain things, and then a lot of it is just blurry. I don't think there's a guidebook on it. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think you just do it. You go through the motions. You have times where you're strong. You have times where you could flip a car and plan the funeral with your eyes closed, and you have times that standing up to get out of bed to get a drink of water feels like the hardest thing you've ever done. And your body is truly undergoing physical torture while your mind and heart are also going through all of those things too. It's such a all-encompassing process. For me, being surrounded by people that took care of me as though I was an infant was what got me through it. Having a partner at the time, as well as my mother, who between the two of them ensured I was never sleeping alone. I was never waking up alone. I think when you're in the acute stages of grief, the absolute worst part is waking up in the morning and having to remember again that they're gone. Because for a split second, when your eyes first open, you almost feel like you're that person before you got the phone call. And then you have to remember all over again. And it is like getting hit by a train when that feeling comes in. It's like an elephant sitting on your heart. And so being vulnerable enough and almost also like having no other choice, because I don't even know what I would have done if I wasn't in that type of a situation, but allowing people to take care of every single basic need I had in the moments where I couldn't physically do it myself, making sure that I was changing my clothes and changing my underwear and had clean clothes to choose from, things that are so far from anything that you're concerning yourself with at that time, end up being the little tiny stepping stones that get you across the river. After the person is gone and you have to come to terms with the fact that there are a lot of logistics around death, there's a lot of messiness, there's a lot of paperwork and decisions and a lot of things that almost give you the opportunity to distract from the loss and also feel like the most difficult things you've ever done, because it's really hard to even think straight. I was the executor of my dad's estate at 25 years old. It was the greatest honor of my life and also one of the most difficult things I have ever done. I did every single thing in my power to do right by him. I did every single thing in my power to make every single decision as though he was sitting next to me. And prior to him passing away, we had had a lot of conversations about things that he wanted or didn't want. He let me into different aspects of the businesses he owned. There was a lot of things that in a weird way felt like they were setting the groundwork for me stepping in to fill those shoes. And when I sat down with his attorney, he said, "This is the simplest and most complex will I have ever presented someone. And it's because it started with so many people being involved. And little by little, every year or sometimes within a few months, your dad would call me and he would say, take this person out or add Macaile to be the person that makes this decision." And he said, "Macaile, over the years and within the last few years, it got to the point where your dad said, I want everyone removed. And I only want Macaile to be the one that determines everything. And she's the only person that I trust with my whole heart. She's the only person that I know will do this with integrity in the way that I would want it to be done." And he said, "This is the most simple because there's one person on it, but complex because you're a 25-year-old that has to make really difficult and really nuanced and layered decisions. And yet each decision meant going and interacting with people that were in my dad's life for years, if not decades. And every single time I sat down with a business partner or somebody that was his property management company or whatever it may have been, I got stories about my dad. I got to be told by them, looking me in the eyes, how much he loved me, how proud he was of me. And it was like little pieces of a puzzle that I got to put together for years after he died. And it was the greatest gift and greatest honor to be able to do that for him, and in turn receive so much that I never could have expected. With that, though, comes a lot of complex feelings from family members. And without getting into a lot of details or unpacking things that I feel like have been filed away in a way that I'm comfortable with now and I'm at peace with now, there were family members that were extremely unkind to me through this. and family members that said things to me that I can't imagine saying to my worst enemy, let alone a child of my sibling that just died unexpectedly. Death will make people do and say crazy things. And the only thing I learned over and over through that is that every single time I get the chance, I will treat people better. I will do better. I will be somebody that says, how can I support you and how can I show up for you? And what can I do? And how can I be of service when I know somebody is experiencing the greatest loss they've ever experienced in their entire life? And it gave me perspective in a way that I wish I wouldn't have had to experience, but I am so thankful now to have, because one, it proved my strength. It proved my tenacity. The amount of times I sat across the table from a banker or somebody that was in my dad's life, and they tried to pull the wool over my eyes. And in the middle of my grief, I said, hang on one second. Can we go back to page 3, section 6, addendum 9, and let's talk about that really quick. And I'd be wiping tears from my eyes as I'm like, you're not bullshitting me right now. And I will never forget one banker in particular said, well, I'll be damned. You are your father's daughter. And it was the greatest compliment I could be given. And it was the greatest testament that I was in the right space and I was doing things the way my dad would have wanted them to be done. And that doesn't mean I did it perfectly, but I did it the absolute best I could. And it also gave me so much perspective as I am able to witness other people navigating grief, how I can show up for them for some of those logistics. I have a list in my phone that I've created that I've shared with double-digit number of people at this point when they're experiencing grief and they're an executor, and I sent it to them and it's like, here's a list of all the things you need to do that you would never think about. Here's a timeline. Here are things because there's a lot of like liability and legality with death that we don't realize. You have this probate period where any collectors can come forth for 90 days. And if they don't, you're good. But if you don't give them the opportunity to, as the executor, you can get sued. Like there's just things that we don't go around learning. And we're learning statistics and science and whatever. We're learning about the I don't even know, you guys. I'm trying to make a joke and my brain's not working. But instead of Pythagorean theorem, it'd be nice if we learned, here are the things that'll help you not get sued when your dad dies. But I learned them with a lot of support from the people around me and also on my own in a lot of ways too. Throughout that time, I will say I lost relationships that were very, very painful to lose. But rather than focusing on that, I also gained family in the people that chose to show up, in the people that, without question, were there asking me, what can I do? How can I lighten your load? Showing up with food, with clean laundry, with anything that they knew could make a difference without me even having to ask. And I've never felt more supported, even though there were major gaps in areas or people that I thought would show up and support me. There was also this element of people that showed up that surprised me in the best way. And I love when people surprise you in a good way. And I promise you, if and when you navigate grief, if you open yourself up to it, people will show up for you and they will surprise you. And while some might surprise you in a not so great way, it will be made up for in the people that will show up for you in a great way. And if you get the opportunity and you get the honor to show up for people as they're experiencing grief, I just hope that you'll pause and you'll let yourself step outside of your own ego and your own experiences or feelings, and you will allow yourself to show up from such a place of love and softness and understanding, because it's an honor to witness people through those moments and to be someone that they trust to let in. Since my dad died and since things, moved on from that acute kind of initial portion, I've learned so much about grief and how to navigate it. And early on, the grief wheel, the crazy wheel, it spins so fast. Every single day, you go through every possible emotion you could ever imagine. And it's excruciating and it's confusing and it's so exhausting. And I'd say, let yourself rest as much as you can Know that that feeling of never wanting to get out of bed again will go away. But sometimes in that initial stage, if you can, you do just have to let yourself rest. You have to let your body heal at a cellular level. There's so much that happens within your chemicals and your hormones when you're experiencing such a painful loss that it really is a physical healing that also has to happen. And so often it can feel good to distract and just push through and be the strong one. And I don't need anything and I can go back to work tomorrow. But I promise you, those feelings will catch up. And if you don't choose to grieve now, you will be forced to grieve a year from now or 5 years from now, or in little tiny glimpses for the rest of your life, where if you just allowed it to really move through you earlier on, you could then move forward with such a different perspective and a different approach. I think after the first little while, I felt really guilty for feeling normal some days. I felt really guilty for laughing or feeling like myself again. And I had to wrestle a lot with, again, who I was before this loss, who I am after, and how can I go about honoring my dad in the most beautiful and amazing ways, and also continuing to honor my life that I'm still living. Because I do think one of the best ways we honor the dead is by how we continue to live our lives after. And nobody that you've lost, and definitely not my dad, but no one that we lose would want us to spend the rest of our lives, in the words of my dad, boo-hooing over them. They would want us to, and do want us to, live the fullest, most amazing, juicy, incredible, wonderful, joy-filled lives that we could comprehend because of them and for ourselves. But I think that it feels like a rite of passage sometimes to walk around with this suitcase of grief we're dragging behind us without realizing it does not make us love them any less to put the suitcase down. In fact, it makes us love them more in honoring what their wish would be. And I'm so confident that anyone that loves us would just want us to live. Live because they are no longer living. That is the way we honor them. Down the road from there, you start to experience anniversaries. First, it's like, it's been a week, it's been a month, it's been 2 months, it's been 3 months. The 23rd of every month is a day that I often, think about as just something that stands out for me, because it was the 23rd of March that my dad died. And I'll notice it sometimes. And it's like, initially it was every single month, and then it was within every few months, and then it gets to when it's a year. And I think it's another thing that we kind of place a pressure on ourselves for. Ooh, it's been another year, and so we better just grovel on this day, or we better really honor them, or whatever it may be. And something that I've found in experiencing now 9 of those, and soon to be 10, is it's often the days leading up to, or the days around that actual date, that I will grieve more, or I will feel like as it's nearing, I'm sort of emotionally processing or experiencing some heaviness around it. But now, a lot of the time when the actual date happens, it kind of just feels like another day. Or sometimes it feels a little numb or a little benign in some way, but it's not like I have to force myself to relive that loss every single year. I will say something that a close friend had shared with me about those anniversaries early on, and also moving forward, that was really helpful, was have 2 plans in place. If as the day is nearing, it feels like the best thing would be to spend it alone, go for a long walk, go to some of their favorite spots, journal, be introspective, and really just be on your own, wonderful. But have a plan B. Talk to a friend and say, hey, Saturday's the anniversary of my dad, my sister, my best friend, whoever, passing away. I think I just want to be alone that day, and I have a whole day planned. Can you be on deck in case I wake up that morning and I feel like I don't want to be by myself? And can we do this, or can we do that? Can we go see a movie? Can we go out to lunch? Can we go for a hike? Can you join me for the day that I already had planned alone, but when I wake up and decide I don't want to be alone, can you be available for me? Having 2 plans like that is so peace-giving, because It allows you to go into it doing the thing that you think is going to feel best when you're just guessing what's going to feel best that day. But then it allows you to wake up that morning and be in your body and know that you have options and ask yourself what you need and not force yourself to be alone because you didn't plan anything else, or force yourself to go do this day of activities when you wake up, you realize, I kind of just want to be alone. So having somebody that's trusted and that you know is going to be gentle with your heart and gentle with you in that, on deck either to be there or not, or be ready to if you need to, is really helpful. And also guaranteed someone that's going to check in on you that day, ask you what you need, show up for you if you need, and just, kind of share space with you in that moment. And I think that has been really helpful and really healing. I think I've also really learned to have new perspective on days that feel hard since losing my dad, not in a way that it's like nothing I ever experienced should feel sad or bad or hard, but in moments at times when I'm really just in a mood or feeling like I'm angry at the world or kind of just in a funk, I can reframe that perspective by thinking about what it felt like to get that phone call and what those days after felt like, and remember that I can get through anything, and remember that no feeling is final, and remember that these really, really intense emotions will subside. And the only way to guarantee they will pass through is to allow them through, to feel them, to not push them away or bottle them up, because they will find us one way or the other. And I think that they often just sit there and knock against the walls of our heart until we're brave enough to open it up and let them through and feel it. And it can be painful, but sometimes just succumbing to it and letting ourselves feel it is actually a lot less painful than resisting day in and day out. And I've just found that in those moments when I kind of need a reframe, it's helpful to just let myself feel what it is that I'm needing to feel. I've also found that creating rituals around grief is very helpful for me. So if there's a day that I'm extra missing my dad, if there's a day that is coming up where it's just feeling really heavy or feeling really apparent that he's no longer here, I'll go out of my way to do something to bring joy to myself or to somebody else. I'll go do a good deed for a stranger without anybody asking. I'll pay for the person's Starbucks behind me. I'll do something that is in the name of my dad and for my dad, and almost transmute. I don't know if that's the right word, but it felt nice to say transmute. That's a cool word. Move that energy from a low vibration frequency up to a high vibration frequency. Do something that feels like a ritual. Sit down and write out a letter to somebody and mail the letter and tell them how much I love them. Tell them how grateful I am for them. Reach out to somebody who was there for me during that time and say, hey, I know it's been 9 years, but I was just thinking about how incredibly supported you made me feel when my dad died. And I just want to let you know you made such a difference in my life. Changing that vibrational frequency from that low, yucky, dark, tarry, muddy, ucky feeling to something that is more high vibration in a sense of giving, gratitude, kindness, changes everything. And learning how to continuously change that feeling of that delayed and chronic grief. During the acute phase, it does not matter how many thank you for being there for me letters you send. It's not fair. Everything sucks. Everything hurts. But when we get beyond that, we are at risk for turning our grief into chronic pain. And sometimes if we can find these little things that flip the script or change direction of the energy, we can create something so beautiful from something that was so painful. And that's something for me that has been almost a joy within this grief. It's been something that it's given back to me. It's allowed the energy to continue to move and to flow in a very beautiful way. I also think having compassion for others has skyrocketed since I've experienced this. We never know what someone else is going through. We never know what type of news someone just received or what they're walking forward from and moving forward from. And it's allowed me to have a compassion being part of a club that no one wants to be part of, and understanding that people may not act in their most beautiful, amazing, perfect ways in the midst of their grief. And there might be some ugly emotions that come out, and there might be some inner child wounds and abandonment wounds and reactivity. And it allows me to have grace and compassion for those people, because there were people in my life that had grace and compassion for me when I was experiencing the deepest grief I've ever experienced. I also think that allowing ourselves to accept that nothing is going to bring them back allows us to release a lot of not only shame and emotion and pain, but it allows us to release guilt around things, holding on to items, pack ratting their shirts, holding on to every single thing they've ever owned in hopes that it'll help us not forget them. Let me promise you, you will not forget them. And the parts of them that are the most important and the most like them, the truest essence of them, are within you. They cannot be contained within a t-shirt. They cannot be contained even within photographs. And giving yourself permission to release creates so much space to receive. The most beautiful gift that we can receive that is tangible from them after their passing is sharing memories with people that knew them, is talking about them to people and letting our eyes light up when we tell them a story or when we tell them something that, reminds us of them. For me, I struggled a lot with letting go of my dad's things. And as I continued to do so, it was still a struggle. It wasn't like it was just the easiest thing I've ever done. But once I got to the point where I really accepted that nothing was going to bring him back, I felt an immense peace and acceptance around him being gone physically. I will say with that too, talking about them often, talking about them to people that also knew them, talking about them to people that didn't know them, sharing stories, sharing perspective, talking about their death, allowing it to be more of your day to day and not something that you feel shame around or keep locked up, are things that also allow their death and them not being here to be integrated into our existence and not kept in a box somewhere else. And then our existence is separate from that. Because at the end of the day, we are one being with so many facets and so many components. And if we can integrate that into our life, it creates so much peace and acceptance. I also want to say, allowing yourself to communicate with the universe and also to allow the person that you lost to communicate to you, whether it be through signs, whether it be through numbers, certain symbols, things that you see, songs that you hear, being open to that, regardless of a deeper belief system. Don't overcomplicate it. When you feel like you see something that feels like a message from them, when you see something out in the community, when you hear their favorite song on the radio, let it bring you peace and happiness and joy. Sit in it for a moment. Talk to them. Thank them. Ask the universe for more of this. There is no reason why we have to dispute their energy still being around us and our ability to connect with them even after their physical body is no longer here with us. Connecting with my dad since he's been gone has been one of my favorite things. If I'm scared at night, I'll talk out loud. I'll be like, hey, can you sit with me while I fall asleep and just allow your energy to be protective of me? I'm feeling a little bit scared right now. If I'm making a big decision and I'm driving in my car, I'll talk to him out loud and I'll ask him what I should do. And there's yet to be a time where I don't feel a presence and hear his voice in my head guiding me one direction or the other, making me laugh usually, telling me that those nincompoops or, that doe doesn't deserve my time and energy, telling me that that boss sounds like a butthead and I shouldn't listen to them. I think that we have to not complicate death in a way of needing answers around exactly where they are and exactly what happened and exactly whether or not their energy is able to be channeled or whatever it may be. And instead, just allow ourselves to still talk to them and communicate with them and channel and connect with them in ways as we are still here on this earth without needing to know all of the answers around the how and the why and just letting it be. Too much energy is wasted on the how and the why. And I don't think enough of our energy is spent just allowing and being thankful for it. So think of a sign, think of a symbol, ask them to start showing you bears or airplanes or lime green Corvettes or whatever it is that you want to channel. And then ask the universe for more of this when you start to see it, and let yourself feel thankful when it comes into your path, because it will. The signs are always there if you're open to seeing them. And the more open you are to seeing them, the more you will see them. And it is such a beautiful stepping stone while we're still here on this earthly world. I'm now going to kind of transition a little bit into ways that you can show up for someone that is grieving. And I want to say that being somebody that is holding space for somebody going through grief and loss is hard. It is not an easy place to be. And if you've been a caregiver or you've been on the partnership or receiving end of holding space for someone that's going through a great loss, it's also important to find people to hold space for you and to ensure that you're engaging in self-care and you're filling your cup as well, because it is not an easy job and it is very exhausting and difficult day in and day out to do. And I just want to acknowledge that. I think that often when we're holding space for people, we feel guilty for being exhausted by it, or for wishing sometimes we wouldn't have to do it anymore and they could just be, quote, normal or act the way they did before this happened, or I want my spouse back, my friend back, this person back. It doesn't make you bad for having those thoughts. So I just want to acknowledge that you are also somebody experiencing a really big, heavy thing. And even if it wasn't happening directly to you and you're the one that's supporting somebody through it, that's still a really worthy, really hard job. The first thing I would say is just do it. Don't ask, especially really early on. And don't intrude in a sense of your like physical space all the time of just, I'm just going to be here and I'm never going to leave. I think there are times in which the person needs their space, but instead of asking if you can bring dinner by, just bring dinner by. Instead of asking if you can grab some of these groceries or bring this thing that you know they love over, or wash their car in the driveway because you can tell it's just been sitting there collecting dust, or whatever it may be, any acts of service that come up, just do it. I think that when you're in the middle of a really heavy, heavy loss, answering a single basic question feels excruciating. And so asking for help feels harder than just not and just rotting, honestly. So I think that when people just show up and just do it, it's such a gift. The next thing is to be careful of cliche phrases. I think it comes from the best place of our heart, but we want to say everything happens for a reason. They're in a better place. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but those types of things that are just not helpful. And especially when somebody's first experiencing it, it's not what you want to hear. I wanted to punch people in the face when they told me everything happened for a reason after my dad died. Because I'm like, cool, what's the reason for this? Because I'd love to know. And I just think that even though grief is hard and we don't always know what to say, sometimes saying nothing, but just saying, I'm going to sit with you. I don't know what to say right now. I don't know how to show up for you. I don't know how to make this better. That's not the point. It's not going to be better. I'm willing to sit here and share space with you and just hold space and be with you in this. I am not scared of your grief. I'm not scared of your pain. I will sit with you in it and I will hold you and I will be here for you through it is such a gift. I also think giving them permission to feel grief is really beautiful. A lot of times when you're the one grieving, it feels like everyone's got to be so sick of this by now, and I can't believe I'm still talking about it, and I just need to try to be normal and whatever it may be. But showing up for somebody and just telling them, I want you to always feel safe to feel whatever you need to feel with me. And if that is, let's spend an entire day pretending this person is still alive and just go be silly and do these ridiculous things and talk about them like they're still here and give your heart a break from the depth of pain you're experiencing, let's do that. If it's we need to be potatoes on the couch, cuddled up in blankets and just cry together, let's do that. If you want to be so mad and talk about how unfair this is and how angry it makes you when somebody next to you rolls their eyes and says, "Oh, my dad's calling again. He's so annoying," and you want to throw their phone into the Grand Canyon, let's do that. Giving people permission to feel what they need to feel and know that they're safe to feel that with you is such a gift. And reminding them of that often, so they know that it's not something that runs out or expires, but instead is like, you're always safe to feel what you need to feel with me. That's really all that you need to say. You don't need to do the cliches along with it. It's just I'm here and I will be here and I'm not scared of this. And it's an honor to sit with you through it. I also think asking specifics can be helpful too, in a sense of sometimes we assume they must just want to like wallow and cry or whatever it is. But like if we show up for them one day, maybe saying to them, what would help you feel the most safe right now? What would help you feel loved today? What would help you feel the most supported? What could I do that would make you feel more loved than you do right now? And letting them give you more specifics versus just like, anything I can do? Do you need anything? Again, they're going to say no. That's just a really hard, open-ended question. And then also, hey, I'm at the grocery store. You don't need anything is not an answer. What can I pick up for you? And if they're like, no, I'm good. No, what can I pick up for you? And if that means it's what is your favorite little treat that you want some of or whatever it may be, like let it be that. But telling me you don't need anything is not an answer. And I guarantee you there will be something that they will come up with that would be helpful and make their life easier. Also, really, really being patient and not trying to fix it. I know when we love somebody, we would do anything to take away their pain. And it's so painful to sit with somebody while they're experiencing pain, but you cannot rush this process. And so just being patient with it is a huge gift that you can give them. And then, of course, in turn, being patient with yourself and giving yourself grace and knowing how to check in with yourself and actually ask, am I in a place to show up for them right now? Because if you're not and you're going to go and you're going to try to scrape from an empty cup, it's not going to help anybody. So you've got to take care of you as well. The last thing for how you can show up for somebody that is one of my favorite things to have done for me and to do for others is put the date in your calendar. Put the date in your calendar when the anniversary of somebody passing away for somebody that you love, and maybe set a reminder to send them a text that morning or to call and check in and just tell them that you love them. When grief first happens, it feels like the whole world stops. And then very, very quickly, it feels like everyone else's world moves on. So on those days when somebody else pauses for even 10 seconds of their day to tell you that their world stopped for you for a second, you feel so much less alone. And you feel so supported and seen and thought of. And it's a very simple gesture that goes such a long way. And it's been those types of small gestures that have carried me through the last 10 years and have allowed me to show up for others and share my grief and share my experience in ways that I can feel gratitude toward. I would give anything to have my dad back, but the lessons I have learned in the last 10 years and my compassion and the depth in which I can love and care for people and the ferocity in which I am committed to truly living my life is because of him. It's because he lived and it's because he died. I don't know if I would be where I am in this exact moment if he was still with us. And so sometimes I have to dig deep into that pit of grief and find gratitude within it too, because I made it out of the other side more beautiful and more compassionate and more empathetic and with more love to give and softer rather than hardened to this world in which I could have just said, life is not fucking fair. Because it's not. And that's another thing you can help and say to somebody else is also just telling them, I don't know what to say right now because this is not fucking fair. You should not be going through this. This is not fair on any level. This shouldn't have happened. It's not fair that it happened. That's so much more helpful than everything happens for a reason because the Hallmark card said so. It is okay to feel angry. It is okay to feel like it is so incredibly unfair, because it is. But also on the other side of that coin, you are going to find so much grace for yourself and for those around you, and such a renewed perspective and such a zest for life if you allow yourself to. If you allow yourself to say, I continue to live because they are no longer able, and I have everything I need because I have my breath. And what am I going to do with that? What a gift. I have another day to change the world, starting with myself. It's such a gift, you guys. And loss is the one thing that is universal. Loss is love. Loss is beautiful. Loss is connection. It hurts so bad because they mattered so much. What a gift. What a gift to have somebody that every single day it is painful to feel the loss of them. It is painful to be without them. That is only because of the magnitude and gravity in which they mattered in your life. And how lucky are we that we have people that when they are no longer with us, it's physically painful to not have them here. I've learned to find so much gratitude in the fact that I was able to experience such a deep love and such a connection that I have to think about it in their absence every single day. If you have lost and you are feeling grief, you had someone in your life that really, really mattered, and that's beautiful, and they deserve to be celebrated and spoken about. And I would love to connect with you, and I would love to hear about them, and I'd love to share stories, and I would love for you to keep them alive through your own words and your own work and your own life. What a gift. I want to close this out by reading one of my favorite passages I've ever come across. And it has given me so much immense peace and hope in times where I just needed the reminder of my dad's energy and presence still being near. And it's also something I've sent to people when they're experiencing grief at times. I don't know the original author, but it's called You Want a Physicist to Speak at Your Funeral. So I'm going to read that, and then I'm going to let you guys go. And holy cow, thank you for being with me through this, because it's been something I've been avoiding, and that actually felt really beautiful and cathartic. And I think it's because I know of the audience in which I'm going to be received. And that is all thanks to you guys and your support and love you have shown me in all the moments I've been vulnerable on here. So without further ado, you want a physicist to speak at your funeral. You want the physicist to talk to your grieving family about the conservation of energy, so they will understand that your energy has not died. You want the physicist to remind your sobbing mother about the first law of thermodynamics, that no energy is created in the universe and none is destroyed. You want your mother to know that all your energy, every vibration, every BTU of heat, every wave of every particle that was her beloved child remains with her in this world. You want the physicist to tell your weeping father that amid the energies of the cosmos, you gave as good as you got. And at one point, you'd hope the physicist would step down from the pulpit and walk to your broken-hearted spouse there in the pew and tell him that all the photons that ever bounced off your face, all the particles whose paths were interrupted by your smile, by the touch of your hair, hundreds of trillions of particles, have raced off of you like children, their ways forever changed by you. And as your widow rocks in the arms of a loving family, may the physicist let her know that all the photons that bounced from you were gathered in the particle detectors that are her eyes, that those photons created within her constellations of electromagnetically charged neurons whose energy will go on forever. And the physicist will remind the congregation of how much of all our energy is given off as heat. There may be a few fanning themselves with their programs as he says it, and he will tell them that the warmth that flowed through you in this life is still here, still part of all that we are, even as we mourn, even as we who mourn continue in the heat of our own lives. And you'll want the physicist to explain to those who loved you that they need not have faith. Indeed, they should not have faith. Let them know that they can measure, that scientists have measured precisely the conservation of energy and found it accurate, verifiable, and consistent across space and time. You can hope your family will examine the evidence and satisfy themselves that science is sound, and they'll be comforted to know your energy is always still around. According to the law of the conservation of energy, not a bit of them is gone. They're just less orderly. Thank you guys for being my tiny army, for supporting me as I embark on the craziest, wildest, but most exciting adventure that I think I have yet, for pushing me to have these conversations alone in my office, petting my dog with tears streaming down my cheeks, because this is what matters. These conversations are what matter. Feeling less alone in a moment of pain and unfairness and grief is what matters. And it's why I'm doing this every single day, so that we can create a community that is not scared to have the hard conversations. So we can create a community that is willing to step in and say, I'm not scared of your grief or your pain when one of us is experiencing it. And so we may really, really rest in the notion that there is such strength in numbers. And once you found this community, you will never have to go through anything alone again. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for ensuring over and over again that I am reminded that I will never have to go through anything alone again either. I love you guys so much. I will catch you next week, and I hope you have a beautiful, wonderful, amazing rest of your day. Catch you on the next episode.